Today I'm going to walk you through what I learned losing 60 pounds as an exercise scientist and a professor in sport physiology. The first point is that the fatigue is real. There's going to be a point when you're losing a meaningful amount of weight that, quite frankly, it's going to suck. It's going to suck a lot. You're going to want to put your head through a wall, and there's no avoiding that. You can make smart decisions to kind of stave that off for as long as possible, but there is a point where you're going to have to actually embrace the suck. It's very popular to talk about fatigue management, auto-regulation, etc. And these are all amazing topics, but you could absolutely over-apply them and end up babying yourself. There was quite a few times over the course of this 60 pounds where, because I wasn't meaningfully tracking different metrics, I didn't know if I really needed time off or if I was just babying myself. And more often than not, I was just babying myself, and I'm supposed to be the expert in this. So one of the things I started doing with this is starting to track more meaningful metrics. So I started tracking sleep, mood, fatigue, performance, body weight, etc. And then I could chart over time, oh crap, I really do need a break here because all of these are redlined, or I'm being kind of a wimp. It's time to be David Goggins a little bit more, and kind of balancing that. A really good example about this is as I was starting to add more and more movement into my program because I didn't want to reduce food anymore, I realized I was adding in more walking because it was easier than adding in more lifting. I was training well below the volume that I needed to optimally grow. I was still growing quite fine, but there was a lot of gains being left on the table. And I was instead adding steps because I was already tired and steps were easier. So I had a real come to Jesus moment. I brought my steps back to a regular amount that is acceptable, and my volume increased by about 1.5x. All of a sudden, I'm getting delayed onset muscle soreness again. Weight loss has started again. I'm looking harder throughout more areas. And the effort in the gym and throughout the day is a lot higher. So in that instance, even as an exercise scientist, I was babying myself. The key takeaway from that is if you're thinking about adding in a lot of extra steps or cardio, like well above 10K, you first need to ask yourself, are you maximizing what you're doing in the gym? If there's a physique goal for you. The next point is going to be that diet breaks can fix a lot. There's quite a bit of conflicting information on diet breaks. There's one camp that says you have to take a diet break every so many weeks. If you don't, you're literally going to snap in half and shoot your kidneys out of your calves. You're just going to die. It's going to be terrible. There's another group that says there's not really any evidence for diet breaks. And that's kind of true. The evidence is not favorable for diet breaks, but I think the coaching experience for diet breaks also kind of speaks for itself that you might not necessarily be able to get on paper. So what do I mean by that? There's a very real psychological willpower and sticking with it component to dieting. Like it gets harder over time, and that's kind of additive. Almost everyone can diet for a week. Not everyone can diet for 6 months. When you plan in or have these road markers up, when this occurs, I'm going to take a diet break because I know I'm more likely to jump off the bandwagon here, and stress and fatigue and everything else is really high. That allows you to better mentally stick with it and stick with the program rather than grinding yourself, redlining your body's vehicle, so to speak, and then eventually falling off the bandwagon. So when that diet fatigue or mental fatigue is crazy high, when that training fatigue is crazy high, and you need to auto-regulate and pull back a little bit, diet breaks are a really awesome tool. There was 2 instances where I took 4-week diet breaks where my calories were at maintenance or slightly above maintenance. And it felt like I turned from a rug rat into Superman with how much better I felt by the end of it. I was recharged and ready to go, and it really powered me through my next phase of dieting. The next lesson that I learned in losing 60 pounds is that your sleep will be tested. So if you're not diet fatigued and you're not training that hard, your sleep can be mediocre and you'll probably get away with it. But if you start maximizing your volume in the gym and you're in a calorie deficit, maybe even aggressive calorie deficit, all these added stressors are going to put a lot more taxation on the sleep you are getting. So if your sleep hygiene and sleep hours and duration is mediocre, you're going to feel it and it's going to kick you off the bandwagon sooner rather than later. Sleep is one of those fundamental things that if you change, it knocks over dominoes and positively affects many other things in your life. So if you're trying to lose a large amount of weight, get your sleep right first. The next point is going to be learn to max out satiety in your meals sooner rather than later. A lot of us think, myself included, that you can just kind of tank the hunger and eventually get lean, and once you get lean, it'll magically be all better. That leads to falling off the bandwagon, myself included. I spent a large degree of my undergraduate career just tanking the hunger, eating foods that were yummy, and not getting anywhere. A much better option is to start maxing out your food satiety, meaning getting more food for less calories. So we're including fibers, vegetables, etc., leaner meats. And this allows you to experience some degree of fullness throughout the diet and hopefully stay with that hunger and that psychological fatigue of dieting for as long as possible. It's also a skill that you can develop for when you actually get out of the diet. It allows you to not balloon up to previous weights. If you've already found a lot of foods that are very satiating that got you to your level of leanness, moving into a maintenance phase or a bulking phase after that is simply about just sprinkling in a little bit of fun on the top. If your burrito bowl was ultra satiating with a lot of vegetables, when you go to maintenance phase, now you can have a serving of Doritos with it. And all of a sudden, now you're on a perfect lean bulk and you're enjoying your food all the time. Versus if you never develop those skills and you get out of your cutting phase, if you make it that far, you're kind of in the wild, wild west of, I think I'm going to go to Taco Bell today. And then these are the 9 out of 10 people that gain back the weight and more that you see so often with our current dieting. This big point that I learned from losing 60 pounds is there's no morality in making it harder. I think there's this kind of altruistic feeling that hard things are automatically amazing and you need to lean into the hard and pick the harder option and do the hardest thing possible. And that is true to a point, but you don't need to make it harder on yourself than you need to. If option A and option B will get you to the same path, but option A is significantly easier, consider taking option A specifically because getting lean in and of itself is going to tax your willpower enough. You don't need to make it harder in other aspects. So what I mean by that, you could choose to volunteer at XYZ thing and take on an extra responsibility at your work and then add 2 more things to your life and start dating 4 people at the same time. Not advocating for that. On top of trying to get lean, all that is doing is making getting lean harder, and there's no morality or benefit to that. Make getting lean as easy as possible. Make your foods as satiating as possible, because at some point in that diet, it's going to suck and it's going to get hard, and you don't need to get there any sooner than what it's going to force upon you. So those are just a few lessons that I learned from losing 60 pounds. We're hopefully finishing up around the 190-ish area, abbed up and good to go. And then we're going to start a little bit of a lean bulk phase, and it should be fun. Hopefully you learned a little bit from some of the mistakes I've made. Don't make them, do better, and have a good time.